Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in work and in life and simplify them. And friends, we have been talking all about what in the world is happening out there in the job market right now. And today's conversation, I'm going to hit it in a different angle. We're going to talk insider baseball. We're going to talk to the recruiters and HR professionals that tune in to this podcast and, talk a little bit of shop here. And specifically, the topic we're going to simplify is how to find and recruit great talent. So my special guest today, her name is Kelly Simants, and she has over 25 years of experience in human resources. Her clients say that what sets her apart from others is her ability to drive change and move a business forward while simultaneously taking great care of the people contributing to the business. Now, she's a senior HR consultant over at Nevada HR Team, but she's also the founder and CEO of My Resume Team, helping candidates navigate the often daunting process of navigating their career search. Her expertise lies in training and development, recruiting, and organizational development. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Kelly Simants. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Mary. How are you?
I am so well, and thank you so much for being here today. Now, from a recruiter's point of view, what in the world is going on with the job market right now, in your opinion? Is it an employer's market or is it a job seeker's market?
It's an excellent question, Mary, and I'm sorry to tell you the answer is both. I know that sounds crazy, but it really depends. It depends on the industry. It depends on the demographic. It depends on, the experience level of the candidate. There are so many variables right now that are playing into, the lay of the land for recruiting. And so depending on the role I'm recruiting for, I have a vastly different experience for myself and for the candidate pool. And so, I think part of what's happening is we're seeing there have been waves of layoffs, in the end of last year, specifically, and then in 2024 early on. And at the same time, there are companies that are busting at the seams with growth and that are in those industries that are just booming, right? So it's this really interesting dichotomy of, lots of talent still available looking for their next opportunity. And so, as a resume writer, for example, we're getting lots of people coming to us that are saying, oh my goodness, I just got laid off. But then on the flip side, from the HR consulting side, I'm working with companies that are thriving and have so many hiring needs. So I could talk for hours just about this one question, but it really is this interesting, land that we're living in right now with the world of recruiting.
Yeah. And I also wonder, the reason why it kind of feels like both is that there's different factors at play for lower wage jobs and higher wage jobs. I feel like, and maybe, I'm speaking from anecdotes, but you tell me from the truth and the facts from your point of view. It feels like lower wage jobs are in abundance and they're desperately trying to find, anybody that will take these jobs, and then just really struggling to find good candidates out there that will even A, show up for a job interview, and B, stick in the job for more than a few months. And then on the other side of the fence, we're talking $100,000 plus kind of roles. It just seems that there are so many candidates out there and not a lot of jobs, or that the jobs that are out there are not really in a hurry to fill those positions because potentially their company's about to go through another layoff. So why hire right now? That's my gut feeling and hearing from other colleagues. Is it the truth in your opinion?
I believe it's the truth. And I'll add to what you just said. After the pandemic, people that had double income households sometimes opted for one of them to stay home. Yeah. And now that it's been a couple years, those people that stayed home are re-entering the workforce. I can't tell you how many people I'm talking to right now that are like, it's been 4 years since I was on, the stay-at-home mom train, and now I want to get back to corporate, and so there's that's playing into those higher level income jobs that you're speaking of. And certainly the lower paying, jobs are struggling. Those positions are tough to fill for sure. So you're absolutely right. That's what I'm seeing and feeling in the marketplace as a recruiter.
And I mean, for all empathy there for those job seekers that are in that lower bracket, gosh, it's really hard to even justify taking a $40,000 job right now. Like, how do you survive? You'd need two of those to just get by. I don't understand quite how those roles even work, if they're full-time and expecting so much from their staff. Like, of course, there are people that are like, oh, I don't know. I don't think that's enough for me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what they're having to do is work multiple jobs or something that they can do from home. Or I just saw someone post in a mom's group I'm in, does anyone have anything that's a night shift? And my heart broke because she has a full-time job with babies at home and she still needs to find something at night. So it's really a difficult time that we're in, especially with inflation and just, the way everything is right now, it's expensive. And so you're right.
Yeah.
It's a challenge for that group for sure.
Yeah. So we're not going to solve the world economy on a podcast today, but I do think that there is some great things that we can at least simplify or figure out when it comes to recruiting great talent, because I do believe there are just incredible people out there that are getting lost in the fray, that are maybe, applying for jobs and desperately trying to put their name out there and, struggling to even get that first interview. So what I hear is that there's just an influx of candidates in the market, and AI is making it easier for them, some of them who have jumped on the AI train, to submit their applications faster, meaning that, go into AI, help me write a resume, bish, bash, boosh, done. But they might not actually be qualified for the role. So there's a ton of people that are applying for roles. How can a recruiter even weed through the stacks and stacks of resumes to find those people who actually are qualified, the very best talent for that role?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are so many different settings, within the recruiting platforms that us recruiters leverage. And so, if I'm recruiting for a job that requires a project management certification, that has to be a requirement that this candidate selects. And if they don't have that, then they're not going to show up in my pool of talent. So there are some quote unquote deal breaker questions that recruiters can ask that will simply weed out the candidates that just simply don't have that experience. So that's one way that I do that. Platforms also have filtering systems for the recruiter now. So they'll actually scan the resume, compare it to the job posting that you've put in the system, bring them as what's called a great match in a lot of the platforms. And so that's important, for recruiters to know that there are ways that you can sift through the 1,000 resumes you're receiving by leveraging the platforms and the AI technology that exists in many of the platforms today.
So what platforms are you familiar with or using these days for that?
Yeah, there are so many. First and foremost, LinkedIn Recruiter is where most of my colleagues live and breathe, recruiting these days for most of the positions that we're recruiting for. However, there are platforms like ZipRecruiter for some of those hourly non-exempt jobs that are fantastic. And they definitely can filter out candidates in the way I was talking about. Bamboo HR, there are so many different, types of tools and platforms that based on the company size and demographic and industry, I would recommend based on the client and the recruiter. But yes, so many out there. Those are just a handful of my few.
And so I'm curious for you, when you're recruiting for roles, do you try to read each and every resume that comes through? Or, I've seen roles that, within 24 hours, they've got 600 applicants. I just can't imagine you have that much time and you're probably trying to fill 20 or 30 roles. Like, how the numbers don't add up. Like, do you actually look at every single resume, you personally?
That's a great question. I don't know any recruiter that would answer that in a way that they would authentically say, yes, they look at every resume. There's just no physical way sometimes. That, like you said, if you're recruiting for multiple roles, it's almost impossible. So most recruiters on average spend 3 to 6 seconds looking at a resume. And if you're a recruiter, you're probably shaking your head in agreement. Yep. And you know pretty quickly what you want to see in a candidate. And if you don't like what you see from the resume, you quickly move on because we don't have time to read through, the entire resume even. You're just quickly assessing if that person might have a potential fit and then, go to the next.
And so the $80 billion question, and I've asked a lot of recruiters this, and there is no wrong answer, but for you, do you even bother reading a cover letter?
Oh, I love this question. It's one of my favorite questions. So depending on who you ask, they're going to give you a different answer. My response is a cover letter can only help you. It can never hurt you. as a recruiter, I've actually reached out to many, many candidates because they've written a very compelling cover letter. They've taken the time to get to know the company, as far as the culture is concerned. They speak to the company mission and values, talk in first person about their passion and why they want to pursue this job. And it tells a story, really. Your resume is one, tool to get your foot in the door, but the cover letter, in my opinion, can really set you apart from those candidates that you're vying against, in these roles. So I actually hired someone, for an executive assistant role because she had the most incredible cover letter, and it just set her apart from everybody else.
I love it. Now, back to weeding through all the candidates, you talked about having kind of great match and knockout questions to help you really get clear on these are the things that you need. So when you do your brief with the hiring manager, you're capturing that information on that first call with them. Like, what are the must-haves that you need? Tell me more about that process.
That's an excellent question because sometimes the hiring manager thinks they might need one thing. We need someone with 10 years of project management experience, to go back to that example. And when I dig as far as, some of the questions, like, okay, if I found someone that had 5 years experience and they're a rock star and they have experience in other industries or areas, not just project management, but they have skills that will be leveraged in a different way, would you be open to that? 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh yeah, and so that gives me as a recruiter some flexibility in who I look for, so that I'm not just pigeonholing my search to those with 10 years plus. So there are different strategies with the hiring manager up front that, I really get crystal clear on what's the avatar for that candidate that we're looking for.
Yeah. I've been a hiring manager many, many times before. And most recently at Samsung, when I worked with my recruiter partners, I loved having that first call and really getting crystal clear on things because, I had been in a position once where I was hiring 4 new people and we were using a job description from 2 or 3 years ago. And the job had already evolved. So the things that were sort of in there, it was not something that would be really cut and paste. And the recruiter and I really hammered that out and go, well, okay, now that this position's evolved, here's what we really need from it. And, some of these things don't make sense because we're asking for a unicorn person that has an obscene amount of experience and can do all these things. But do we really need all of that? Or is there actually something better, to hone in and simplify, right?
Yeah, that's a really great point because you're right. And sometimes a hiring manager will inherit the job description. They weren't even involved in the process because, to your point, it's dated. And maybe the HR professional is just, in a hurry trying to get the job posted. And that happens a lot where it's just like, okay, quick, here's the job description, post it, instead of taking that time to really, get granular, like you said, get crystal clear on what you're trying to find in the market.
Totally. So let's switch gears a bit because I really want to talk selfishly because I am one of those people. Let's be real. I want to talk about people who have non-traditional career paths. Like when you're reviewing those resumes, and obviously in 3 to 6 seconds, you're trying to do it very quickly. You've got to try to figure out great potential, right? So how do you do that and really make sure that you're also looking at those candidates with a non-traditional career path, meaning somebody who hasn't just stayed at one corporation for 10 years and rose up the ranks, but maybe did some consulting work here or, had their own business? What would you say to those people?
Yeah, the good news is that now more than ever, the non-traditional resume is actually more relevant than it ever has been, and so more people have taken a zigzag path with their career as opposed to climbing the ladder, different levels. And so the right recruiter, the right hiring manager is going to see that capability and talent in a candidate and their experience, and they will value and appreciate those years in consulting, for example, or even time off, and so that experience is everything, to me, when I'm looking at the whole candidate profile. What do they bring to the table? And to me, it doesn't matter if they've, been an entrepreneur and started their own business and now they're wanting to get back into corporate. I absolutely don't disqualify anyone just based on that. It's the story you tell on your resume, though, is important, as most recruiters here, would vouch with me, because sometimes people don't communicate it well. and tell the story about how they've, hopped around different industries or different projects, different, contracts, things like that. So that can be difficult as a recruiter if I'm seeing a resume that just doesn't make sense. It's choppy and it doesn't flow and it doesn't tell the story. Then I might look past it unintentionally because I don't really understand what this person's been doing. If it flows well and it makes sense, then I can absolutely grasp, that they have the capability to do the job.
Let's go deeper here. So when you say choppy and doesn't flow well, meaning, they were a bartender at one point and then they were a firefighter for a couple of years and then they were a project manager. Is that what you mean or something else?
Yeah, that's what I mean. And also, sometimes in a resume, if they have a summary, like an executive summary at the top, let's just say a paragraph describing what they're looking to do next, it's almost like a potpourri of all the things they've ever done instead of, coming up with the blend of all those capabilities. And for example, the project manager role I keep referring to, how do you position yourself for that role and leveraging, the experience that you have, maybe as a bartender, as a whatever, right? And so a lot of what I see is just not a concise story that they're pitching. It's more of just spotty all over the place type of resume.
I mean, maybe if you were a bartender, a fireman, and now a project manager, you're somebody who is quick on their toes, incredibly calm in stressful situations, knows customer service, and knows how to rescue. I mean, maybe that's all right. Maybe that's part of your executive summary, right?
Exactly. Yes. And again, going back to the cover letter, that's where you can tell the story and explain it, because it really can be confusing to a recruiter if there isn't a first person type of language telling the pattern of what happened, in your career journey. So, yeah.
So, it's interesting because I think about recruiters and I really have a lot of empathy for you guys because you're desperately trying to find the right candidates, right, for every role. You're trying to navigate the ambiguity from hiring managers where they may or may not tell you what they really need, because they're moving fast as well. You're trying to weed through hundreds and hundreds of applications and resumes and trying to figure out which ones are bogus, like totally written by AI, and which ones are legitimate people who, would be a great candidate. And ultimately, you're trying to do something where you're trying to bring forth people who are low risk, high payoff, right? And that will stick in the job and deliver results, right? Am I missing something there? That what else you're looking for?
No, you're looking for people that have the drive and the charisma and the passion to align with the company's culture too. That's a big piece for me is a lot of companies can teach, the job. They can teach them the industry, but sometimes what you can't teach is that true passion and energy and excitement for work, Some people have it and some just don't. And so aligning the culture is really, really key for most of my clients in the consulting space when I'm recruiting for them. If the culture fit isn't there, but they're amazing technically, sorry, it's not a go,
Yeah.
Your piece has to be a fit.
That makes sense. So, when you're going out there and you're trying to build your pipeline of great talent, can you talk to me a little bit about using social media or where do you find great people? What's working for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I mentioned, there's the traditional job sites like LinkedIn Recruiter and ZipRecruiter. There is the old-fashioned networking, getting, in front of people in a room and going to different networking events, Chamber of Commerce events. I'm part of so many different networking groups with women, specifically in our area, because not only are they looking for jobs, they're typically looking for their jobs for their spouse or their partner. And so for me, that's been a really great demographic to tap into. On social media and honestly, just some of the Facebook groups. So, yes, being scrappy is what my approach is to recruiting and really navigating my network and leveraging, conversations that I have with different people that are leaders in different industries and whatnot.
And I imagine you probably do quite a few like 15-minute or 30-minute kind of virtual coffees with people just to if somebody's reached out to you or you've found somebody, say on LinkedIn Recruiter, and you're like, well, gosh, I don't have a role right now, but I might in 3 months, who knows? You do a lot of just kind of connecting and getting to know a person, right?
Yes, absolutely. Early on in my career, I learned about, the principle of always be recruiting, even if you're openings. And so I'm constantly building my pipeline, and that is part of being an HR professional these days. It's just, you never know who you're going to run across that you're going to need potentially tomorrow, to fill a role. So, or who they might know, to help you fill a role.
And so at Nevada, if this is confidential information, it's okay. You don't have to answer. But like, how are you tracking your pipeline? Do you have a back-end system in the HR management software to, have a database of people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I use LinkedIn Recruiter. That is where I usually live and breathe for the positions that we recruit for. That is our demographic. They're all in LinkedIn. And so, and my clients are all in LinkedIn. And so that's our platform for ATS.
Got it.
If the client has a specific platform, then we leverage what they have internally. And so that might be ZipRecruiter, it might be Lever, it might be, Gusto, Bamboo HR, whatever the platform.
Yeah.
But for us internally at Nevada HR team, we just leverage LinkedIn Recruiter.
Got it. So I'm curious then, seeing kind of what the job market is like right now and how hard it is for recruiters to find great talent, but also equally, candidates that are out there are going, this interview process is a hot mess. Do you have some ideas of how recruiters could actually freshen up the interview process to actually improve the candidate experience? Because in reality, the candidate experience is part of the employee life cycle. It's everything, regardless of if they get a job at this point or 3 months from now with you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. In my opinion, it starts that conversation we were talking about earlier with the hiring manager. That's where this whole candidate experience starts from, because you're getting crystal clear on the profile of the job. So there's no miscommunication between what you're communicating as a recruiter to the candidate and what the expectations are of the hiring manager.
Yeah.
I learned that if that's not aligned from the get-go, there are so many miscommunication challenges that can happen. And HR is telling the candidate one thing, and then the hiring managers might be saying another. And so that, from the candidate experience, is huge, in my opinion. And then simply making sure that there's a response time. It can be so challenging as a recruiter to return emails and phone calls to candidates. And I'm not perfect at it by any means, because there are so many people that we're talking to. And so I think having that response time, whether it's 24 to 48 hours after an interview that you're getting back to the candidate, that goes a long way, because the candidate is very anxious, to know what the next step is, if they're moving forward or not. From the actual interview process, I absolutely want to make sure that the candidate is comfortable. And so as a recruiter, I prepare them beforehand, so for every recruiter listening, if you're not doing that already, definitely help the candidate, prepare, like, these are some questions I would ask the hiring manager, and help give them some ideas, because sometimes people just don't know. They've been at their job for 20 years and they just got laid off.
Yeah.
And so this is the first time they're interviewing in a long time. So having some grace and some compassion, I think, for people that are on the hiring side is what I'm recommending these days, because a lot of people just haven't had the practice of interviewing. Even if they have, it's not like you're interviewing every day. It's not a skill and a practice that a lot of people enjoy. So anything you can do as a recruiter to just help the candidate feel at ease, prepare them, give them some insight into who they're going to be meeting with. And then actually, as far as the interview questions are concerned, that makes a huge difference. Of course, you want to get to the technical side, but you also want to make sure you're asking questions that will help you determine if they're the right culture fit. And having, a little bit of conversation like you would over coffee, if it's a virtual call like this, just trying to make it as comfortable for that person as possible.
Totally. And I mean, gosh, you spend so much time and effort and resources finding this great person. Of course, you would want to prep them and make sure that they're shining as bright as they can once they get to the interview process, because there's nothing more frustrating than you've done all this work and then the hiring manager's like, I don't know about that one. Can you go find some more candidates, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It is surprising, though, how many candidates I talk to that tell me they weren't prepped for an interview. They just were thrown in there. And they weren't really set up for success. So I think as a recruiting, industry, we can do a better job overall, myself included. There's so much opportunity for improvement, and just, being creative and keeping a pulse on what candidates are looking for in that process too. So
I also wonder, I mean, tell me if you do this as well, but it sometimes is just so necessary to get off the hamster wheel. Because, like, you might have back-to-back calls, screening call after another, boom, 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 and your days are just so full and busy, right? But if you can carve out even just an hour, like find a space in your meeting schedule and carve out 1 hour, zero distractions, and sit down and write on paper, what is the candidate experience timeline for any role? Step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is this, and put times to it. Like, here's my goal date to have, X number of candidates to you by. Here's when we're doing first interviews, second interviews. Here's when we're going to have it locked and loaded with offers. Like, I think that we do this in our brain and we don't actually stop and stop the madness and actually map it out on paper first and go, what is it currently and what is it that I would like it to be to improve that experience for our candidates, and then do something about it. Like, go, okay, well, why is it broken? What piece of this is not great for the candidates, and what piece can I focus the next 30 days to just improve 1%? And then, take action towards making those changes, right?
Yeah, and I would actually take it a step further and get a focus group of new hires and ask them, how would you improve the candidate experience? I can't tell you how many times as an HR professional, we think we know the answer. And then when we talk to the people that actually went through the process, it is night and day from what we think we need to change. And so I think it's a combination of both. Certainly there are internal processes that can be streamlined better and whatnot, but having those recent hires that are so open and willing to share, I think is valuable experience too, that you can, learn from them.
That's so smart to do a focus group because, right in those first 30 days, they're super excited about working there and it's all very fresh in their minds. So they're going to tell you the honest truth, I think. Or if nothing else, they're going to tell you what worked well. And so that you can improve the things that they're not mentioning. You go, oh, okay, well, so offers are not being brought up in the surveys process. So maybe there's something in the offers part that we need to really re-examine, right?
Exactly. And I always tell new hires, this is a safe place. There's not going to be any repercussion for you being honest. We're just wanting to make it a better experience for everybody. And so prefacing it with that is important for recruiters too, or hiring managers that are, having those conversations with the new hires. Because certainly as a new hire, they also don't want to, throw anyone under the bus if there was a miss. But having that open, honest conversation is great.
Yeah, ultimately, it's like, what can we do better? That's not what did we flub up and completely was a disaster, which there may actually be some of that, but what can we do better? It's a reframe of the question. Well, and then the back end of LinkedIn Recruiter is always evolving. There's so many tools on that side that can help you really weed through and find things. So, but what about do you have standard stock responses for like booking that first interview or second or making the offer? Those kinds of things that simplify your process?
Yeah, that's a great point. Certainly, there are so many different templates that we have to, streamline the candidate experience. And then I customize it though, because they can feel vanilla. And that's why I hesitated, when you asked that AI question, because sometimes AI can feel, to me at least, that it doesn't have that warm touch. And I know you can teach it, to be your personality and your tone of voice and whatnot. For me, I actually enjoy that part of the candidate process to, just say, hey, how was your weekend at the baseball game? And that's what AI is not going to know. But yes, from a template perspective, 1,000%, that's what I have ready to go. And so that it's just seamless for the candidate experience when we're following up and, letting them know about next steps and whatnot.
Do you have a target time to fill goal right now? Like where you're trying to get on the average certain jobs filled faster?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do. And I know my timeline is more aggressive than most. I try to fill roles within 3 weeks. And I know that can be really a challenge because some people have to give 2 weeks notice, of course. So that's not always a viable option. But when it is, I know how important it is to have that role filled for the company and for, the hiring manager. And so when I have an open rec, I go to town. I mean, that is my focus to really find the right candidate and not, skimp corners or anything like that through the process, but just really finding those gems that I can bring to the hiring manager to present them with some talent.
And there's a bit of like avoiding kind of decision fatigue for the hiring manager as well, right? So you don't want to present, here are 40 great candidates, you probably narrow it down to what, 5, 7, 10? How many do you typically give them right at the first round?
I actually err on the side of fewer initially because in my experience, I've found that I can identify those 1 to 2 unicorns. So I might present 3 candidates, but any more than that initially is typically, it's too much. It's overwhelmed for the hiring manager. And then it's difficult for them, to your point, decision fatigue sets in. And so when I find 3 rock stars, that's typically enough. And then the great problem is when they have a hard time deciding, and then we'll help them navigate that. But I find that any more than that it's too much. And then you're getting too many candidates through stages that you may not need and want them to get to just to have a number, that you're presenting to the team. So I really try to be specific on who I'm presenting. And I write detailed interview notes for the team that I'm working with so that, I can capture my conversation, but also help them understand what sets them apart from other talent.
Yeah, for sure. And do you find that as an outside recruiter, like one that's in-house for a company, but then one that is a third-party recruiter, is there a difference in kind of time to fill ratios or approaches for you?
Yeah. Internally, there are certainly different metrics for recruiters. And they typically have a much heavier workload. They might have 30 recs that they're working on at any given time, while I might have 3. Right. So it's a boutique experience that I am conducting with my clients. If I'm looking, for someone at the COO level, that is going to take me some time. That's not going to be a 3-week turnaround. Right. I should have prefaced your question earlier by that. If it's a C-suite role, something that's very specific niche, different demographic that has to be on site, those can be really time consuming. But yeah, internal recruiting positions tend to be just higher volume, and the external recruits, like people like myself, tend to just have a little bit fewer that they're working on.
Yeah. And I think that, it goes back to that candidate experience. If you've mapped out your timeline and your plan, and you've got the hiring manager to sign on to, okay, we're opening the rec on this day, but our goal to time to fill is this day, and here are the milestones in between, that sets accountability for you and the hiring manager, right? But also taking that extra step and, once you've identified some candidates and you've pushed them through to the recruiter screening call, just simply telling them what the timeline and the goals are. It seems so silly. It's like a Captain Obvious thing to say, but I think a lot of times recruiters just don't reveal that. And I think that that's important for both sides of the coin, for the candidate, for the recruiter, and for the hiring manager, right? Be open, be transparent.
Yes, I just told a candidate the other day, this might take some time. You may not hear from us in a week, and I know you probably want to hear sooner than that, but I want to be open with you that, people they're traveling and we have to coordinate schedules. And so if you don't hear back, it doesn't mean you're not moving forward. It just means that we need to, calibrate everybody together. So yes, I think transparency and just a little bit more communication is excellent all the way around, to your point. The other thing I do as a recruiter is I have a weekly cadence with my companies I work for, where I send them a dashboard, an update, or we'll talk about it, just depending on what they prefer. This is how many candidates I've screened. These are, the people I have in queue. These are the ones I want you to interview next week. So that they know top of mind, what we're working on. And that way, too, it's not like, I'm just working on this for 3 weeks without giving them updates. So that's been really helpful for me as a recruiter to just have that open line so that the company, hiring manager knows that I'm working hard on it, but, we just haven't found the right candidate yet.
Yeah, such good advice. Now, if you're listening out there and you're looking to hire an outside recruiter and you're a small to medium-sized organization, I definitely recommend Kelly and their team over at Nevada HR Team. You can go to the show notes to find all the links to get connected with Kelly and what she does over at thesimplifiers.com. But also, if you are a job seeker and you've been sneakily listening to our conversation today, well done you, because you're learning the inside secrets. But she also has a business called My My Resume Team. So that's myresumeteam.com. If you need some help in getting that LinkedIn profile optimized, your resume needs a once-over so it really stands out as a great candidate. In fact, they're giving a 20% off offer to all of our podcast listeners for any resume service. All you simply do is type in the promo code SIMPLIFY20 over at their website, myresumeteam.com. So make sure to check that out. Now, Kelly, as we wrap up, there's a few questions I like to ask everyone that comes on the podcast. And again, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing some insider secrets. First question is this. What is one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
I love that question. The Miracle Morning is a book that is radically changing my mindset and my mornings. And it's by Hal Elrod. And he also has a podcast, a couple of books, just a really incredible mindset type of book that I think anybody at any age, any industry, any position can benefit from. So that's been my latest and greatest that I've been enjoying.
Excellent. What a great recommendation. We'll stick that in the show notes for everybody. Again, thesimplifiers.com. You can find a link to that book. So tell me, who is somebody in your network, somebody you know personally, you just feel is up to brilliant things? If we could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast. Who would you mention?
Yeah, I love that question too. My sister is an incredible interior designer. She has worked in interior design for 6 years, and her name is Kirsten Lyle. It's Kirsten Lyle Interiors, and she's based in the Dallas area, but she travels all over. She has clients, that she's working with in Cabo, for example, and she just has a really clean, simple aesthetic. She wants to bring joy to your home and does that in such a beautiful way. So I'm partial since she's my sister, but she's helped me remodel parts of our home, and it's just been an incredible experience. So that's who I would recommend.
Such a great recommendation. We'll stick her in the show notes as well. I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for today?
Oh, I am grateful for sunshine and 80 degrees. We sat out last night on our patio and it was amazing. And just any time that I have reprieve outside of work with my family is just everything to me. So that's it lately.
Oh man, springtimes in Texas is literally the best. It's like porch patio weather. It is the best. When you get to July and August, not so great, but so again, all the links are in the show notes. You guys can find it over there at thesimplifiers.com. My final question for you today is this, Kelly. Someone somewhere is listening to you and I right now. She's a recruiter and she is underwater, barely treading and trying to keep up with all the things that are on her plate, really struggling to find great talent out there and just feeling a little bit overworked and burned out. What's one thing you could whisper into their ear right now just to encourage them in this moment?
You're not alone, and leverage your colleagues. Call people like myself. Reach out to recruiters that are in your same industry and get together and talk about your struggles and your opportunities and areas that you can help each other. I actually just had that conversation. Someone reached out to me, and it was just such a breath of fresh air to have someone that wanted to get together, collaborate, was not a competitor, we're in the same space, but just wanted to help me. And likewise, I want to help her. So I think, don't do it alone. There's so many of us that are high achievers and want to close these jobs out, right away and are underwater with so many recs open. And leverage your network, talk to your colleagues, and just really, rely on your support system.
Kelly, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Mary. Likewise.